The first morning in our beach house felt like the beginning of another life. After 40 years of saving, of putting aside little pieces of ourselves for the sake of tomorrow, Edmund and I finally unlocked a door that was truly ours. The salt air greeted us before we even stepped inside, sharp and clean, carrying the cries of gulls that circled lazily above the shoreline. Waves rolled in steady rhythm, as if the ocean itself was keeping time with our breaths. Inside, the house still smelled of fresh paint, mingled with the faint sweetness of cedar beams that had held their ground against decades of storms. The floorboards creaked softly under my steps, not with weakness, but with character, as though whispering, "I've stood long before you, and I'll stand long after." Edmund carried in the last box of books, his shoulders bent but steady, and set it down in the corner with a sigh that was half exhaustion, half triumph. I walked to the wide kitchen window, my hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee we'd brought from the old house. Through the glass, the ocean shimmered silver in the morning light. I thought of all the years we had dreamed of this late nights, when bills stacked high on the table, when Edmund worked weekends tutoring, when I shelved books at the library until my knees ached. We always ended those hushed conversations with the same promise one day. And now, standing barefoot on our own polished floors, hearing gulls wheel above the dunes, that day had finally arrived. My chest swelled with a peace I hadn't felt in decades. Edmund brushed past me, humming a tune under his breath. The corners of his mouth turned up in quiet satisfaction. I pressed my palm against the cool glass, watching the tide draw in and out, constant, patient. At last, we had reached the life we had worked for, the haven we had imagined in whispers. But even as I breathed it in, I couldn't help wondering how long such peace could last before someone else decided it belonged to them. The phone rang just as Edmund was arranging his books along the living room shelves. It was an old beige landline, the kind we'd carried from house to house through the years, its curly cord forever tangled. I smiled at him as I picked it up, expecting perhaps a neighbor welcoming us or the realtor checking in. "Maribel," Clara's voice came through, brisk and clipped. "We'll be there tomorrow at 10 with 15 of my relatives. Get the rooms ready. We'll be staying 2 weeks." I froze, the receiver warm against my ear. No hello. No congratulations on our new home. No question of whether it suited us. Just instructions, dropped into my morning like stones sinking in water. "We just moved in," I said slowly, hoping she might soften, might laugh and say she was only joking. "Exactly," she replied brightly. "So you're settled now. You don't need all that space for just the two of you. Family helps each other out, right? My parents are flying in, the kids want to swim, and my cousin's bringing his dog. You'll have everything ready." Edmund looked up at me from across the room, his brow furrowing as he saw my face pale. He set down a stack of books and walked closer, drying his hands on a dish towel. I covered the receiver and whispered, "Clara, she says she's coming with 15 people." He pressed his lips together, not surprised, not even shocked, just weary, as though he had always known this moment would come. He placed a hand gently on my shoulder, steadying me. On the line, Clara's tone remained light, almost cheerful, as though she hadn't just claimed our home without invitation. "It'll be fun," she added before hanging up, not waiting for my response. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, heavy and hollow. I set the phone down slowly, the kitchen suddenly too quiet, the peace of the morning fractured. Edmund's eyes met mine, and in them I saw the question forming before either of us spoke. When family treats your home like a hotel, what choice do you have, comply or resist? I stood at the window long after the line had gone dead, the ocean rolling steadily as though nothing had changed. But inside me, something shifted, a memory opening like an old wound. Clara's tone had not surprised me. It had been growing in me for years, one small cut after another. I thought back to the first Thanksgiving at her house. I had brought my sweet potato casserole, the one everyone used to ask for, browned perfectly with a pecan crust. I walked in carrying it warm, wrapped in a towel, proud to contribute. Clara barely looked up. "Oh," she said flatly, "we don't really do heavy sides anymore. The kids are eating cleaner." She turned and walked away. I stood there in the hall with the dish in my hands, feeling foolish. No one ever tasted it. Then Christmas came, and I had chosen gifts for the grandchildren, carefully books, puzzles, small things to spark imagination. Clara took them from me at the door with a tight smile. "Thanks. I'll sort through these later. They already have too much stuff." I never saw the children open them. The years passed, and the little slights stacked up like layers of dust only I seemed to notice. Once she asked me to bring paper plates to a cookout, as though that was the only way I could be useful. Another time she corrected me in front of everyone, her voice sharp, her eyes sliding past me as though I were background noise in my own family. Even when Edmund was sick, recovering from surgery, I texted her updates. Weeks later, at a birthday party, she said lightly, "Sorry, it's just been crazy. No visit, no call." And my son, Nathaniel, said nothing. Not then. Not ever. His silence became a wall between us, heavier than any words. I had convinced myself to endure it, to smile and keep showing up. But as I stood in our beach house, Clara's command still ringing in my ears, I felt the weight of all those years pressing down. How many small dismissals does it take before silence finally breaks? That evening, Edmund and I sat at the small dining table, the one we had assembled only the day before. Its surface was still bare wood, the bolts newly tightened, but it was sturdy enough to carry the weight of what we were about to decide. Between us lay a notepad, a pen, and the silence that had followed Clara's call. I tapped the pen against the page, the rhythm steady, almost calming. Edmund leaned back in his chair, watching me with that quiet patience he had always carried. "We can't let her walk in here with 15 people and treat this place like a rental lodge," I said softly, as though speaking louder might shatter what little calm we still held. He nodded, his silver hair catching the lamplight. "Then we won't." The simplicity of his answer steadied me. For years, I had been the one to bend, to excuse, to swallow words that pressed hard against my throat. But here, in our house, bending felt impossible. The waves outside roared faintly through the windows, as if reminding me that boundaries, like tides, had their time to rise. We began a list. First, reserve a room at the Seaside Inn just down the road quiet, with fireplaces in every suite. Second, pack our bags. Only what we needed: clothes, a few books, the folder of documents Edmund never traveled without. Third, print a rental contract, official enough to make Clara pause. If she wanted to treat our home like a free hotel, then she would face it in black and white. Edmund added one more line to the list and underlined it. A smile. He looked at me when he did it, and I couldn't help but return the faintest one. We wouldn't raise our voices, wouldn't argue in front of her crowd of relatives. We would simply step aside and let her see that this house wasn't hers to claim. When we finished, Edmund folded the paper neatly and set it by the door. The air in the room felt different, then lighter, sharper, like the first clean gust before a storm. The next morning, as we zipped the last suitcase and placed it by the door, the road outside was still quiet, but soon it would not be. What happens when silence is no longer submission, but strategy? By mid-morning, the quiet street outside our beach house was broken by the crunch of tires on gravel. I stood at the kitchen window, mug in hand, watching as one car after another pulled into the drive. Engines hummed, doors slammed. Voices rose in cheerful calls that didn't belong to this house. Edmund set his book down on the counter, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing. The first to step out was Clara. Her hair pulled high, sunglasses perched on her head, clipboard in hand as though she were running a corporate retreat. She waved briskly at the trailing cars, her voice loud, authoritative. "Okay, everyone, bring your bags inside. Let's get settled." I stayed where I was as the noise swelled. Laughter, the thud of coolers being dragged, children shouting about the ocean. Clara led the charge up the steps, pushing the screen door open without so much as a knock. "All right," she announced, her eyes already scanning the rooms. "Kids can take the den. My parents will have the master bedroom, and my sister and her husband can stay near the bath for the baby. We'll figure out the rest as we go." Her relatives followed like a practiced chorus, setting bags on the polished floors, kicking off shoes, claiming corners as though they belonged. A cousin passed me in the hall, smiling warmly. "Wow, thanks for hosting us. This place is beautiful." His words stung, not because of him, but because Clara had already written us out of our own story. Edmund moved quietly beside me, slipping his hand into his pocket where the folded contract rested. His steady presence kept me from reacting. Clara turned to me with a bright, expectant look. "Maribel, where's the folding bed? We'll need it for the kids." Her tone was brisk, casual, as though the question was already answered. I didn't reply. Edmund stepped forward, calm as stone, and reached into his pocket. Clara's voice carried on, instructing her cousins about towels and fridge space, until Edmund placed the paper into her hand. She blinked, startled, her words trailing into silence as she looked down at the bold heading across the page. "What happens when the host decides not to play along?" Clara held the paper as if it were written in a language she didn't recognize. The confident smile she wore only moments earlier faltered. Around her, the noise of bags thudding to the floor and children laughing seemed to dim, curiosity drawing eyes toward the sudden stillness. "What is this?" she asked, her tone sharp but uncertain. Edmund stood with his hands clasped loosely in front of him, his voice even. "A rental agreement. The cottage is not available for uninvited guests. As of today, it's ours alone. If anyone wants to stay here, it will be under contract." Clara's mouth parted in disbelief. "But I told you, we made plans. Everyone came expecting you didn't ask," I said quietly, cutting across her words with a calmness that surprised even me. Her cheeks flushed as she glanced from me to Edmund, then back at the contract. Her relatives shifted uneasily, their voices murmuring in low confusion. A cousin leaned toward another and whispered, "Did you know about this?" A shrug was the only reply. Clara's parents exchanged a glance that carried more embarrassment than anger. One of her uncles spoke gently. "Clara, did they invite us?" The question landed like a stone dropped into water, rippling through the crowded room. Clara's lips tightened. "Of course they did," she snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. Edmund gestured toward the stack of suitcases by the door, neatly lined as if ready for departure. "We'll be leaving shortly. You can consider the place rented if you're willing to sign. Otherwise, it will remain closed." I watched as Clara's grip tightened on the paper, the edges crumpling under her fingers. Her confidence had been replaced by something raw confusion, wounded pride, and a scramble for control. Around us, the chatter grew tense. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves. Relatives shifted uneasily, some already collecting bags they had only just dropped. Clara took a step closer to me, lowering her voice. "Why are you doing this?" "We're family. We always stay together." I met her eyes, steady, unflinching, because this is our home. And today, we chose to protect it. The room hung in silence, waiting to see what she would do when her grip on control began to slip. When control slips through their hands, how far will entitlement go to claw it back? By the time Edmund and I checked into the inn, my phone was already buzzing nonstop. Message after message, Clara's name lighting the screen like a relentless signal. I placed it on the nightstand, face down, but the vibration hummed against the wood, insistent. The first voicemail arrived before we had even unpacked. Her voice, clipped and trembling, spilled into the room. I don't understand what you did. Everyone's confused. You embarrassed us. The kids are upset. How could you do this to your own family? Edmund glanced at me, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. Another message followed, shorter but sharper. We needed this. You knew that. You should have made space. Isn't that what family does? I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands resting on my lap. The ache in my chest wasn't guilt. It was sadness. A mourning of years lost, of words I had never spoken, of rooms where my voice had been ignored. I had been treated like background noise for so long that silence had become my only refuge. But here, in this quiet inn with its low, crackling fireplace, my silence felt different. Not weakness, not retreat. It was a choice. Edmund set a cup of tea beside me, his hand brushing mine. You don't have to respond, he said. And I knew he was right. For once, I didn't owe an explanation. Not for my boundaries, not for my peace. The messages kept coming, full of accusations, half-hearted guilt trips wrapped in the word family. Each one landed, but none pierced. I pulled the blanket over my shoulders and listened to the rhythm of rain against the window, the noise outside, the noise on my phone. It all faded into something distant. For the first time, my silence spoke louder than Clara ever could. Is silence the cruelest punishment, or the purest form of self-respect? The next morning, the phone lit up again. I ignored Clara's name, but another number flashed on the screen, one I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Clara's cousin, his voice low and uncertain. Maribel, I just wanted to say, we didn't know. We thought you invited us. Clara said it was all arranged. There was an awkward pause. I'm sorry for showing up like that. We never meant to intrude. When the line went quiet, I sat back in the chair, the weight of his words sinking deep. For years, Clara had positioned herself as the organizer, the decision-maker, the voice of the family, and all the while, I had convinced myself I was imagining things, that her dismissals were personal. But now I knew she had been shaping the story, making me the outsider, not just in feeling, but in perception. Memories surfaced like old scars reopening. Her laugh at Christmas when I suggested reading the grandkids a traditional story. Oh, they've outgrown that. We like to keep things modern. The time I wore a necklace Edmund had given me decades ago, and she murmured, charming, but a little old-fashioned. Don't you think she closed doors with a smile, leaving me standing on the outside every time? And Nathaniel, my son, my silence had been matched by his. When she cut me off, he looked away. When she dismissed my gifts, he said nothing. His compliance had been a wound deeper than any sharp word Clara could throw. Hearing the cousin's apology that morning shifted something inside me. For the first time, the truth wasn't just mine to carry. Others had seen through her. Even if my own son hadn't, Clara's version of family was nothing more than control draped in charm. The validation didn't erase the hurt, but it clarified it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things I had been manipulated. And now, the silence I held wasn't just survival, it was resistance. What happens when outsiders see the truth more clearly than your own blood? 2 days passed before a new message arrived. This time, not from Clara, but from Nathaniel himself. His name on the screen made my chest tighten. I opened it slowly, bracing for disappointment. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know about Clara's plans until the morning she packed the car. I should have called you right then. I should have stood up before. I didn't. I'm sorry. I read the words twice, then a third time, my eyes tracing each line as if they might change if I looked hard enough. Edmund was beside me, his hand resting lightly on my knee. At least it's his voice this time, he said. Yes, his voice. Not Clara's, not filtered through her plans or her tone, just my son. And yet the ache remained. I thought of my grandchildren, their laughter on the beach, the sticky hands clutching seashells they once pressed into mine. I missed them more than I could say. But longing couldn't erase the years of silence that had cut so deep. For so long, I had excused Nathaniel's quiet compliance, telling myself he was caught in the middle, that his silence was survival. But silence is still a choice. And now he was finally reaching out, late but honest. I set the phone down, staring at it as though the weight of his words lingered in the room. Respect had to come first. Without it, nothing else mattered. Not visits, not holidays, not even the sound of my grandchildren's laughter. I didn't respond that day. I needed to sit with his apology, to feel its shape in my hands before deciding what to do with it. Can a late apology heal years of silence? Or is it too little, too late? 15 days later, Edmund and I drove back down the winding road that led to our beach house. The sun was setting, streaking the horizon with ribbons of gold and rose. When he unlocked the door and pushed it open, the familiar scent of cedar and sea air wrapped around us. Everything was as we had left it, quiet, waiting, untouched. We unpacked slowly, almost reverently. There was no rush, no noise, no invasion of voices filling the rooms. Just the two of us, carrying bags to their places, settling into the rhythm of a life we had earned. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in hand, the ocean a low, steady hum outside the window. I typed carefully, each word deliberate. You're always welcome here, Nathaniel, but only with respect. I need to be treated as a person, not background. I love you, but I won't disappear to keep the peace. My finger hovered for a moment. Then I pressed send. His reply came an hour later. I understand. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. I'll do better. I let the words sit in the quiet room, the glow of the screen fading as the tide continued its endless rhythm outside. Edmund poured 2 cups of tea, setting one by my side without a word. I sipped slowly, the warmth grounding me. The waves erase footprints every day, pulling them back into the sea, but no tide can wash away the shoreline itself. That, like dignity, remains steady no matter how many storms press against it. When family demands everything, what is worth more, their comfort or your dignity?